What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Chop and Brew. I'm Chip Walton, here once again with Jonas Walton to introduce the first in a series of 6 intense, in-depth, and very educational / entertaining interviews about mead making, mead judging. We call the series Better Judge a Mead, and our host and moderator for this series is the National Meadmaker of the Year, Josh Holbrook. Very excited about this series. We're about to drop a whole lot of mead knowledge throughout the month of August. As you might know, August 7th is Mead Day. We decided to make August Mead Month. First up is Peter Bakulić, the president of Mazer Cup International, the world-renowned mead competition and education organization. They go deep, y'all. This is a really long episode. We decided to just keep it intact. Next up, just put it on your calendar, Mead Day Eve, August 6th, the one and only Ken Schramm. Whoa! So we'll be dropping that on Mead Day Eve. Before we get to Josh's intro and the full-length interview, I want to remind you that all Chop and Brew episodes are brought to you with support from Imperial Yeast. Their current limited edition strain, Bartleby Kvike, now available at your local homebrew shop. And as always, our mead-loving Patreon party people. Join them in keeping the show sweet like honey at patreon.com/chopandbrew.
Pete Bakulić has been making mead for over 40 years. He's an active member of the mead community. He's the current president of the Mazer Cup International, which is the world's largest mead competition. He also serves as a moderator on multiple online mead forums, and he's a regular presenter on mead at UC Davis mead classes, and is currently working with the Mead Institute to develop a new credentialing system for the mead world. It's safe to say Pete knows what he's talking about when it comes to mead evaluation, and I want to sincerely thank Pete for willing to be a part of this project and share his knowledge. All right, I am here with Pete Bakulić. Thanks for joining me tonight, Pete.
It's great to be here. I'm happy to do it.
So we're just going to go through a discussion on some of these mead judging topics, things that, we want to discuss, things we think could be done better, and I want to get Pete's take on this because Pete's been around a long time. He knows what he's doing, and I think he's got a perspective that I want to have more people be able to hear and take advice from. So I think on that note, I'd like to hear, Pete, your take on, do you have specific advice for new mead judges? Because not everybody is going to come into a judging scenario with a whole lot of experience under your belt. Like, that's inevitable. So when somebody is walking in fairly new, what advice do you have for them?
I think the main thing is learn how to steal the things that make sense from everybody that you work with at a judge competition. Watch other judges who have more experience than you that you feel like maybe have some things in their bag of tricks that you don't have. Learn from them. Learn how to taste, how to evaluate, how to kind of get a sense of what's in the glass before you even taste it, and then try to form an opinion on it. Don't be intimidated. You're there to judge mead, so do that. Judge mead. Judge what's in front of you. I see a lot of people get distracted by conversations at other tables or by what's going on in the room, or if there's an argument somewhere, they'll want to try to insert themselves into it. Don't let any of that stuff bother you. You're there to judge mead. Be a mead judge and learn as much as you can. Take it as a learning experience. There's going to be some things you get right. There's going to be some things you get wrong. You're going to sit down at a table inevitably at some point and find out that your palate doesn't match up to the guy across the table from you. And you can't be at odds with him the whole competition, or neither of you are going to have a good time. And unfortunately, the people that are going to suffer are the entrants, the people whose mead that you're judging. The bottom line is you owe them for their little entry fee the best effort that you can put forth to give them the best evaluation of what's on the table in front of you that they made. I mean, they bought it, they shipped it there, and they paid the entry fee, and it cost them to ship it too. So there's a fairly, significant investment. It's not like a commercial mead where they're paying $70 to $150 per entry, but at the same time, it ain't cheap to ship mead, it ain't cheap to buy honey, and it certainly isn't cheap to make it because, there's labor involved in this. So go in there with the sense that you're going to learn. And like I said, steal techniques, concepts, methodologies, and procedures from people. Look over at a table. If you see a judge that's tasting a certain way and that seems to make sense to you, take it, learn it, use it. If you see somebody else is doing stuff that makes sense, some stuff that doesn't, take the stuff that makes sense and toss the stuff that doesn't. Everybody has their own little niche, and find out what works for you and then exploit it.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people's first entry into mead judging is coming from a beer judging background. A lot of times it might be a competition that mixes beer, cider, and mead, and a judge might be experienced in beer, but they get assigned to a mead flight. So, and I know with beer, the concept of judging acid and tannin is not really a thing compared to mead judging, where it's very crucial. So can you walk me through how a judge should go about detecting acid and tannin, and like how you would gauge their intensity?
Sure. So it's interesting. This has been a topic that's popped up a lot lately, judging acid and tannin. I won't even say judging, I just say the content of acid and tannin in mead. And, when you're looking at a traditional mead, it's kind of like a moot point. The predominant acid in honey is gluconic acid. It's not tartaric, it's not malic, it's not citric like you would get in wine grapes. So the amount of acid you're going to have and the acid influence is going to be very low. Now, there's some people that think that that means you should add a bunch of acid to it to give it some brightness and some raciness and some zip. That's fine, but that's a preference. That isn't something that you judge a traditional on. If I taste a traditional and I get prickles on my tongue, like those little tubes full of pixie sticks, that pixie dust that you used to get when you were a kid, it like kind of got on your tongue and prickled, that's citric acid, and it just does a number on the front of my tongue. I know that it's been adjusted with acid, and that's a huge turnoff for me. But you have to take a step back from that sometimes and say, did it improve the quality of what it is that I'm judging? And I think to myself, no, it actually got in the way of me judging, because now the front of my tongue is all numb from the tingly acid that was in there. And I'm really not getting a good sense of what the rest of it is that I'm tasting. Tannin, the same way. In a traditional, honey doesn't have a lot of tannin in it. I haven't sat down and gone through an exhaustive analysis of honey and the amount of tannin that each one of them have, but I know it's not anywhere near what grapes have and other fruit has. So when you get into melomels and piments and various other mixtures of different ingredients, that's when it becomes important. And that's when you kind of take into account tannin. Is it something that is consistent from the front of your mouth to the back of your mouth? There's a lot of things like angular tannin. It hits you in the same place all the time. In wine, we'd say if it's angular, it's hitting you in the back of the mouth. If it's catechin based, which is stemmy or seedy from the grapes, it's hitting you in the front of the mouth. And it tends to be pretty harsh. How do you evaluate that? What I do is I call it the rabbit. Take a sip of wine, swish it around in your mouth, in between your teeth and your gums, and then get your tongue up in there, wet the front of your upper lip, pull it down over your teeth. Now, if you're able to pull your gums down over your teeth, the tannin content's pretty low. But if you're pulling it down, it comes to a screeching halt, like halfway there, you got a lot of tannin in there because it's abrasive and it's like drying. The tannin is a phenolic compound that binds with the proteins in your saliva, and it causes a drying effect. And so when you get that kind of a feeling in between your teeth and your inner lip here and on the sides of your mouth and underneath your tongue, it feels kind of rough, or grippy is a good term. So when you take that sip of wine and you pull your lip down and it comes to a screeching halt, that's tannin. That's big tannin. With acid, again, acid is one of those kind of things where when additions are made, for me, the first hint that I get that this has been adjusted is there's like a kind of like a million little stickers sticking in the tip of my tongue. I can feel it all over the place. I get this from different kinds of fruits as well. Currants, especially red currants, lingonberries, cranberries. they all have that very aggressive upfront acid hit on the front of your mouth. That's what you call, foremouth impact, but not in a good way. And you can feel it prickling across your tongue. So what you want is kind of a happy medium with those two things that makes a pleasant experience, but not overly weighted in one direction or overly weighted in the other direction. You want something that has a nice impact, a nice first impression. It comes across, it's got some brightness there. There's some nice drying effect from the tannin. And as it washes, it's constantly changing. The flavors are evolving, it's moving along. And those two things in perfect harmony really help to bring out the different nuances of whatever it is that you're judging.
You mentioned how certain levels of acid are going to be dependent on the judge's preference. Do you think overall balance in a mead is a subjective thing, or is one judge going to say this mead is in balance and another judge is going to say no, the balance would be better with this amount of acid? Do you think that's a very subjective thing, balance? Because that's a lot of mead judging overall. Our overall impression seems to hinge on balance. So what's your thought there?
Well, I think balance is a very subjective thing. To me, balance is not so much the weighted difference or similarity between tannin and acid in a mead. I think it is everything in balance. Do the flavors match up to the mouthfeel that you're getting from the acid and tannin influence and alcohol? Is the warming from booze? Is it like boozy that's causing your tongue to be, hot? Or is it the acid? Or is the tannin that's just like so strong that it's causing your tongue to be sore from the drying effect? You're looking for all these things in harmony. You want them all to be at, I won't say at the same level, but at levels that kind of are supportive of the flavor and overall character that you have as you're tasting and judging. So to me, the tannin and acid are in traditionals aren't so much a concern as they are in melomels, sizers, piments and such. But at the same time, there are people that will, add tannin and add acid to traditionals. I think what you have to take into account there is, does it really improve it? If it does, great, grade it accordingly. If it doesn't, then, it's not really a slam against the mead itself. And most people don't call out their additions. A lot of people don't tell you that they've adjusted in competitions, that they've adjusted the acid or the tannin. But if you've been around for a long time and you make mead yourself, you'll know. You'll know somebody that's, made a mead that, 9 times out of 10, you'll know if it's had any adjustments made during the fermentation, just from the mouthfeel, the implied sweetness, or the dryness, or, if you're tasting like an orange blossom, got it in front of you, and, all of a sudden your like upper lip sticks to your teeth and it won't move. You know that there's been something that's been done to that, because you're not going to get that level of tan and dryness from orange blossom honey.
To actually get a feel for if a mead is in balance, like especially for a new judge, is there some things they should look for? Is it just making sure that there's not any specific elbows sticking out, something that is distracting in a mead, or should they focus on like the finish? What characteristic really lingers into the finish? Is there any objective way for a new judge to get a good sense of when something's in balance?
Well, I think you hit it on the head there. Is there anything that's distracting about it? And like you said, are there elbows out? Please keep your hands inside the ride at all times. If you're cruising along and that mead is cruising along and it's giving you a real nice ride and it's telling you a story as it's moving from the front of your palate to the back of your palate, and in a good way, you're kind of like, ooh, that's a little bit orangey. Ooh, that's a little bit citric. Ooh, that's a little bit vanilla. It's developing and it's telling you a story as it's going along. But then it's all like, oh, somebody just kicked me inside of the mouth. Whoa, what's that scrapey thing on the top of my mouth? Ouch, why is that hurting so much over there? How come that's so hot? Those are the things to look for. It's like I'm an exception-based reporting kind of a guy. So if I'm drinking a traditional, let's say sweet mead made from orange blossom honey, I'm going to be looking for that if it's from California, I'm going to be looking for that jasmine nose. If it's from Florida, I'm going to be looking for something a little darker, a little earthier. If it's from Texas, it's going to be even more aromatic in some cases. From northern Mexico, even more aromatic. I mean, they get this crazy aromatic honey from the citrus groves there in northern Mexico. So it's, that's just, in one small region of the world. It's the same way with grapes. I mean, if you grow Shiraz grapes in Australia and Syrah grapes in France and Syrah grapes here in California, they all develop differently, and they develop differently down in South America and in Chile as well, and in South Africa. So, the honey is going to take on the characteristics or the terroir of wherever they are. And I think as you spend more and more time judging, you kind of get more and more in tune with the different kinds of honey from different regions. Another great example is buckwheat honey, Eastern buckwheat versus Western buckwheat. Eastern buckwheat is barnyard horse piss, sweaty saddle leather. Western buckwheat is more, it is softer on the palate. It isn't as out in your face with the barnyard characters, and it has actually, when warmed up and used in a bouquet, it comes up very chocolatey. So there's differences between different kinds of honey from different regions, and you don't know that going in. So that's when you start asking, is this right? I mean, this smells like, they put like about 2 scoops of dirt from the bottom of a horse stall in it. Is that the way it's supposed to smell? Yeah, in this case it is. Ask the Poles. I mean, they use it to make these fantastic meads. And, it takes a while, but that's the honey they use. And I think that's a challenge for mead makers in general, is working with different kinds of honey to get the best they can out of it. And
orange blossom is a really exciting example that you use there, because I can't think of many other commonly available varietals that are available from so many different regions as orange blossom. And I think it's exciting to think about where mead appreciation and honey appreciation is going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now. Is that going to be common for people to be able to differentiate those regions for varietals like that? I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, I've actually had some orange blossom honey, or I'll just call it citrus honey, because it obviously wasn't all orange blossom, but from down in Baja California, around just south of Tijuana and north of Ensenada, that I could swear up and down somebody had taken zest and put it into the honey, of citrus zest. And, there wasn't any in that bucket. I mean, so, and yes, I did sneak it across the border. So, but it was just insane. I've never had honey before or since. It just goes to show that, different climates, different places will have different flavors. So it's good to learn those.
I think this is a good opportunity to talk about the raw honey elephant in the room.
Okay.
Raw honey as an undesirable flaw in mead is a comment that I think is kind of a divisive issue. Maybe it's a regional thing. I've seen it a lot in the Midwest, and where I'm at in Minnesota, it seems to be a comment that gets bandied around a lot. And I see, other folks online argue that this is a really overblown flaw. So I want to get your take on raw honey. Is it something that you've experienced in mead as an off flavor? Do you think this is an overblown thing? What's your take there?
Well, I haven't been to a competition where I've ever dinged a mead for having a raw honey flavor, because I just haven't really noticed that it was. I have had meads that have been spiked when we're doing tasting classes with raw honey, and then you could taste it and it was obvious. But I got to tell you, and I've been making mead since 1978, and I've back sweetened with raw honey. I've never had a raw honey comment on my score sheets ever. So I think when people start talking about that, if they're actually tasting it, that's great. I think a quick way to shut them up about it is to do a triangular tasting. I had a friend who used to talk about how he could tell the difference between, any kind of whiskey because he drinks so many of them. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to have some fun with them. I went ahead and took a bottle of Jack Daniels, a bottle of Wild Turkey, and a bottle of Buffalo Trace, and I emptied them into 3 jars and then poured them back into each jar, different jars, kept track of which was which. And funny thing, he didn't say a word about any of them.
Nice. And you guys are still friends?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had an argument, obviously, but he got over it.
I want to jump into talking about specific styles. Do you think there's certain styles when we're talking about BJCP styles, just because this is the way that so many competitions are organized and grouping entries by BJCP styles? Do you think there's certain styles that really suffer from a lack of judging experience, whether it's because the judge has not had meads in that style before or some other reason?
I think the one that suffers the most is traditional. Everybody gets carried away and really impressed with this big, juicy, fruity, overly extracted, overly acidic, overly sweet melomel, made from dark fruits and this, that, and the other thing. And I think that's great if that's what you want. But we're judging, and just because something is big and strong and sweet and acidic and high in alcohol doesn't mean it's good. It just means it's big and strong and sweet and high in alcohol. My buddy Carvin would say it's all like, somebody hands me a glass of diabetes, I'm gonna judge it on its merits and not on its, just because it's so sweet and so big. There's definitely regional biases throughout this country. There's a region that we call the Sugar Belt. And, everybody likes to make their meads out there big and sweet and alcoholic. And that's great. But that doesn't mean that it's the best mead out there. That doesn't mean that it's, better than the next one. There's guys that make big, sweet, alcoholic and acidic and sweet, tannic meads out here on the West Coast that stand up to anything, and I mean anything, made out there around the lakes. And the bottom line is, okay, it's big, it's sweet, it's acidic, and it's got plenty of booze. That's great. I love those kind of meads just like I do any other kind. But I don't set them on a pedestal above everything else. I don't use it as the archetype to judge every other mead about. I guess my advice to new mead makers is to don't get overly impressed with one style. If you're going to be judging a lot, get impressed with every style. Do your diligence on them. Learn what they're all about. Learn what makes a great traditional a great traditional. Learn why a great traditional should beat a great melomel at a table. Learn why a great melomel should beat a great spiced mead at a table when you're sitting at best of show or a mini boss. So learn about these things and be able to recognize the strengths and weaknesses of a particular style within the styles and putting it, against the same style on the table. And when you get to a mini boss, learn why this mead, this melomel made from plums and other, stone fruits, has more character and more positive going on than this really great, strawberry sparkling mead over here. That is really good, but it's got a little bit of seed astringency in it. It's not quite, balanced the way that it should be, but it's still really nice. You got one that's like very elegant and very put together, and another one that's just really exciting. So it's kind of like, which one do you like? And it's in that case, especially with new people, it's really tough to kind of like filter out the level of enthusiasm he has for something when it's like, it's that first aha moment. It's all like, oh my God, I didn't realize it could be like this. And then it's like, you're latched onto that. Doesn't mean that you just bought yourself a lifelong career in that particular style. It just means that this is something to note and store and learn about. And if you make it, learn how to make it so you can make it for yourself. Like I said, if you're new, it's kind of like the first table you sit during a competition. Don't get impressed with the first mead that hits the table if it's great. because there may be 3 or 4 more coming after it that are just as good, if not better. So you have to kind of keep your, options open, so to speak, and take it for what it's worth and judge the mead that's in front of you rather than against this one and the next one and the next one when they come up. Oh, I still like number 1 better. Well, sure, that's your first taste. That's why Pepsi wins in the sip test, because they always put Pepsi first before they put Coke. And in a sip test, sweet always wins over savory. So in the long test, when they sent Coke home with people to come up with an evaluation, it beat Pepsi. So, the way that tests are stacked, make a big difference. And so I am a big proponent of blind tasting. And when I mean blind tasting, it's not like, hey guys, we're going to do we're all going to make a mead that has no additives. So we're going to do what they used to call the show mead with no nutrient, just honey, water, and yeast. And then we're going to sit down and judge against stuff that's been made with those. And we're going to see which ones are better. When I do a blind tasting, I call a bunch of friends, they come over and I give them 3 cups that are labeled A, B, and C. Which one's different? It's a triangular tasting. They don't get to know what it's made from. They don't get to know what style. They don't get to know how it was made or what's anything like that. You just tell me which one's different. If you can, you move into the next round. If you can't, you're out.
Nice. This sounds stressful tasting at your house.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned, and I think it's a really good point about bias toward intensity in judging. And it reminds me of when in beer competitions, if you're talking about, say, example, stouts, it seems like if you're grouping all the stout subcategories together, the boldest, strongest imperial stouts tend to win out and show up with medals. So is there a way to combat this with mead? Do we need to organize things differently, or do we just plain old need to get better at appreciating subtle, simple, but really well done meads when they're stacked up against really complex, intense meads?
Yes. It's a combination of all of that. I mean, I think you hit the nails on the head at several points there. Number one, yes, we do need to get better at appreciating mead in the different styles and categories, everywhere from the intense to the non-intense. We need to do better as organizers when it comes to competition as to keeping the style descriptions in the sheets that we give out to the judges and in the description of the mead with the information more neutral, so that they're not getting some people write commentaries on these things and it's hilarious. This is a light sweet mead made from freshly harvested eastern Michigan honey. It's like, okay, that's great, but it has no place on a judging form because you're introducing bias. Wildflower honey. And the other thing is too that there are, for new judges, this is kind of hard to pick up on, people that have been around judging for a while, and you'll start noticing it in competitions, mostly smaller and regional competitions that I've been to. You'll be at a table with a couple of guys and you're tasting a mead going like, this is kind of average, and the 2 guys are just going on about how great it is. So I make it a point when I sit down at a table to introduce myself and say I'm with this, particular brew club. Which brew club are you with? What's your name? And if I'm sitting at a table with 2 guys that are from the same brew club, and that are local brew clubs, and all of a sudden I'm tasting a mead that's not so great and they're tasting a mead that's amazing, I know something's up. And I've seen this a lot. I'm sure other people have run into it as well. I've seen it here in Southern California at different, I go to a lot of different brew club meetings, or used to. I don't quite as much anymore because we generally end up getting in arguments about things like this. There's a competition happening, the next day, and they're on Friday night. They're all like, okay, I know Jim's entered this. I know he's entered that. I know he's entered this thing too. And it's like, he's using these kind of bottles. He's using this kind of cap. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to leave right now because number one, cross me off your judging list. And number two, I'm going to, say something to people so that they know that this is the kind of competition you run.
Yeah, that would make me pull out what little hair I have.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. And, I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I've seen it here, and, I've done a few outside of the California competitions as well. Not as much as say Carvin has, but, he and I have had conversations about this before too. There's definitely regional and local biases going on, and in some cases a little bit more than that. And, I don't get out to that many competitions outside of my general Southern California area, besides some in Arizona, some in Nevada, some in Northern California anymore. But it's just like, come on, guys, winning a medal isn't that, important. Let's put a competition on that's going to take into account somebody's craft rather than your buddy's, heavy-handed, chocolate, boucher, vanilla, chipotle spiced meat that everybody thinks is great.
Yeah, and I'd suspect a lot of judges' experience with meat in general is going to be colored by people's meads that they've had locally. So we probably, as judges in general, need to make an effort to expand our palates and drink more commercial meads and maybe just get out of our region a little more.
Yeah, I think that's right. I found myself in the early 2000s doing a lot of traveling so I could go to different competitions and such in the Southwest area. And, I met a lot of great people, a lot of really talented judges, got a lot of great mead, and learned some things that really helped me, move forward as far as judging goes. And in a lot of cases, when I was first making it, there weren't a lot of competitions, other than wine competitions. You see the occasional mead there. And, my family made wine, still does, me at least. And so it was things that I'm familiar with in the wine world. And then this book, this really amazing book by Roger Morse came out called Making Mead, Honey Wine. And that was the first book that I'd seen that dealt specifically with mead. And that was in I think they released it in 1979 or 1980. And I got this book and I just ate it right there on the spot, just, burned through it and started making all the mead from it. And it was a very different approach than, the traditional winemaking that I was doing at that point. So, and then, these, the guys that were helping him write the book are the guys, Kine and Steinkraus, who put their stuff together. The Morse, Kine and Steinkraus were the ones that basically were the precursors for Made K. So they were talking about adding nutrient at that point, which was something, other than DAP. Of course, there was DAP in it, but at the same time, it wasn't this, wow, we got this, and we're bringing up the, yeast assimilable nitrogen. And they were talking a completely different language there. It was something that I was familiar with because I was a microbiology major with a minor in chemistry. But, it's not something that the home winemaker was really that cued in on. And, I thought to myself, well, gosh, if this really can help with, making mead, then I got to try this. So I went down and I, bought all the stuff that they had in the books and made my own little mad scientist, concoctions and all that. Some of them were great. Some of them were just drain pours. You go through that when you're learning. You're gonna make drain pours, and it's just that you just got to learn from it. That's one of the things that I've never had a problem doing. And the other thing is, when you're new as a new judge or as a new mead maker, and I think a lot of people get into judging because they make it. They want to meet other people that judge and make as well. One of the worst things you can do, in my opinion, is to take a mead that is bad and share it. Because all that's going to do is take mead and just take the reputation of mead and just go like, boom, drop, dink, 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 bounce off the floor. The other thing is, at some point, we've got to get enough people to understand when we say, I'm going to a mead competition, and instead of getting the inevitable question of how do you compete with meat? Yeah. So
I'd love to hear your advice for judging historical, because I don't think I've personally had an opportunity to judge historical yet, and I honestly feel like I would be pretty intimidated because the guidelines are very broad and vague, and obviously Polish and Tej tend to be the major things that make people make in the style, and there's obviously other things that fit into historical, but even in regards to those styles like Polish and Tej, what makes a good Polish, what makes a good Tej, because I have had no luck finding resources that explain what's desirable, what's undesirable, what's characteristic, what's not. I think there are things coming out soon from what I've heard from the BJCP, particularly about Polish, but can you walk me through like some of your advice for historical?
Sure. I mean, historical meads are kind of an interesting batch because, you know, you have a lot of people talking about, you know, well, the Vikings used to make mead this way and then blah, 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 blah. And that's great. But we're modern, you know, we're not running around wearing, you know, an iron helmet and, you know, chasing people around and that kind of thing. We have better resources to make better mead. We have modern science. We have modern equipment. Let me tell you, if Vikings were living today, they would be carrying, you know, M16s and the latest and greatest that's out there. They wouldn't be carrying around a shield and a helmet and a sword. I think from a historical standpoint, you have to understand that people used what they had at hand. So, you know, the introduction of hops came much further in history than using meadowsweet and mugwort and sweetgrass and nettle and those kind of things. And to be sure, a lot of those were considered to be medicinal herbs and plants and quote unquote power herbs and plants. They gave certain things to your system, to your body, to your mental health. So with that in mind, they concocted something that was going to be a tincture or a elixir or some kind of a health altering thing, which didn't necessarily imply quality or flavor. It just was there to help you get along. Now, that wasn't the case for all mead. A lot of people wanted to make really tasty, sweet stuff. Everybody loves honey. So it was ambrosia, as the Greeks would have called it, you know, nectar from the gods. The Egyptians used bread to make it. The Egyptians had a very developed beer brewing process. So did the Sumerians. Actually, the Sumerians were probably the most, you know, at that point, had the best documented brewing lexicon around. But, you know, the Egyptians were making mead, the Greeks were making mead, the Romans were making mead. And it's interesting that everybody wants to go back to historical recipes when 9 times out of 10, the reason that there was honey in wine is because the wine was so bad they had to sweeten it to make it palatable. So I think it's with that in mind that I approach historical meads. I think I look for the same things in historical meads that I do in modern meads. I don't look for the technique. I don't look for the ingredients. What I look for is overall character. Is it something that is drinkable? Is it pleasant? Does it speak to me in terms of a balance of the ingredients? And there's where balance is important. If you're dealing with something like, how many people know what mugwort is? How many people know what meadowsweet is? How many people know what nettle is? Not a lot, but if you can taste something and it's pleasant and nothing, like you said, it's all elbows and arms outside of the cart on the ride, that's a good thing. Now, if you're judging historical mead, to me, what I keep in mind is that this isn't going to necessarily fit into any specific category. So there's advantages and disadvantages to that. The advantages are that you're not constrained as far as amounts or types of ingredients. So it can be a big over-the-top fruit mead with, you know, a little sprinkling of meadowsweet, a little sprinkling of, you know, different kinds of flowers. Let's say nasturtiums for some peppery character, and that's going to be all well and good. But at the same time, if somebody's making a, you know, big over-the-top mead that's just got a ton of grassy character with some really stemmy or green astringency from seeds and, stem in the fruit, then that's going to be unpleasant. So I think I approach it judging the same way that I would with modern meat. I look for all the same things. I just kind of take a look at the ingredients and say, okay, these ingredients are different. How do they work? Do they work well together? Do they not work well together? Is it a pleasant experience? Is it something that I would drink a glass of? Would I finish this glass? Would I go and buy a bottle? And inevitably, if there's enough entries, at least, you're going to run into one that you would say, like, I'd go out and I'd pay $10 for a bottle of that. And to me, that's kind of the way that I go with it. And to be honest, I don't really have a really good grasp of all of the ingredients. Someone like John Talkington, he's a wonderkind at that kind of thing. He knows the stuff inside and out. I know a few of the things. I've made a few. I ran around Ren fairs like everybody else. So you hear the talk there, and you hear a lot of guys talking about how great this meat or how great that meat is, and you go over to their camp and you taste it. These guys don't know what the hell we're talking about. But then you go over to somebody else's camp who isn't talking a whole lot about anything, but he's making great meat. It's all like, okay, this is a guy I want to learn something from. So as far as historicals go, there are certain things in Polish meads. They tend to use buckwheat honey. They tend to use fruit, sometimes dried, sometimes fresh. They have a very specific process they use. I'd suggest getting someone like Chris Pliska or Merrick, this whiskey. Pavel Pavan, from out in Cali. There's some other folks as well that could probably help you out there. They've had a very developed professional mead culture out there in Poland for a long time too. They make really great mead. It's aged. There's a certain process. There's a heating involved, especially with the buckwheat honey. So those are things that follow a process and a very specific one. And Merrick and Chris, they can really clue you in on that. I've made it. I don't make it like the way that they do, because I'm spending a bunch of money on honey. I'm not heating it, and that's just my own personal opinion. And that's where opinions kind of diverge on certain things. There's certain things that I will heat. There's certain things that I won't. It just depends on what I'm making, what I'm trying to produce. So
I'd be curious if you had you were at a judging table and you had an entry come across your table for you to judge that was supposed to be a Polish Dwoźniak. And my limited knowledge of Polish, I would go into that judging thinking, okay, I'm expecting a Polish mead to be fairly alcoholic, fairly sweet, and to have some age character to it. You mentioned the use of buckwheat. So say you get an entry that says Polish Dwoźniak, and it doesn't have buckwheat, it doesn't have significant age character, and maybe it's only semi-sweet. Are you going to say that this is out of style, or how would you judge that?
I'm going to say that it was a nice attempt at a Polish mead, and judge on the benefits, and then basically say that, like, this is a nice attempt. It's a good learning curve kind of a thing for you, but this is not really a true Polish style mead, in my opinion, based on these criteria. For something like Dwoźniak, you want a big, sweet, alcoholic aged mead. Think of Jadwiga that's been aged for 25 years. They're very, they're very distinctive. They have a signature kind of flavor and character. And once you're familiar with that, it's very easy to tell, based on that flavor and character, how close somebody is and how far away they are, based on what their attempt is. When you first start drinking, you're going like, is this supposed to taste this way? Because it's kind of funky, but it's kind of good. And, it's kind of, like brownish. So it looks like it's been sitting around for a while. But after you drink it a little more, it's all like, yeah, it's kind of pleasant, and then, yeah, I could drink more of this. And then, you look at the 2 bottles that are empty in front of you going like, how did I get here? I love Polish mead. I had the good fortune of having Stanley Stowski, who was the guy who began the company Stowski Imports out and they're in, I think it's Chicago, if I remember right. And he sponsored us a few times at the Mazer, the International Mead Festival, and then again at the Mazer Cup when we were first, running it as the Mazer Cup International. And he brought over a 60 and a 40-year-old Polish mead, and they were phenomenal. Just the development of caramelic and mocha and different kinds of molassesy, mapley, toffee kind of characters that just developed over and over. And, the aroma was amazing. So those are kind of like, to me, the gold standard of Polish meads, and what kind of impresses me as a Polish mead. When you have something that's kind of like firing on all eight, that's about what you're going to be getting.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like for myself, I need to just seek out some examples and just get more familiar with, some of the classic ones that you mentioned, because I don't know how, I haven't seen them in the liquor stores for me, but it sounds like there are some ways to get my hands on some, maybe online.
Oh yeah, you can definitely find them out there. There's one brand, I can't remember the name of it. It's like Castella or something like that. They're kind of a squat bottle that reminds me of a Jadwiga bottle, kind of like shaped like that, kind of like a pot belly on the bottom. That makes some pretty good ones too. Couldn't remember the name, but that just saved my life.
I'd like to hear your advice for if I'm sitting down at a judging table and I'm getting a mead in front of me, and it has, say, a couple ingredients I've never even heard of. Maybe it has a really obscure honey varietal that I've never tried. These scenarios obviously happen. So what should I do? Do I ask judges at the next table? Is it Dr. Google? What should I do in that scenario?
Well, it's interesting because I think the information age is a great thing. We can pick up our phone and Google anything and pretend like we actually know something. The downside of that is competitions like the Mazer Cup International and some other competitions out there now are kind of asking judges to keep the phones off the table. If they have a question about an ingredient or something like that, they'd like you to contact the room steward or your table steward or your table captain and ask questions. For me, I have no shame. If I don't know something, I'll ask. I don't care about whether somebody thinks I'm an idiot because I don't know what a certain varietal of leatherwood honey is from Australia and what its character should be, because I don't get leatherwood honey up here very often. And so I'm unfamiliar with the very different species that are out there. But I'll ask. It's like I said, I have no shame. If I don't know, I'll ask with the question, hey, what's this supposed to taste like? Is this right? Can you give me a breakdown? And same way with an ingredient. We've had, can't remember, I was in a Besta show somewhere and they had some kind of a garden plant that I'd heard of, but not in the color that they were saying. It was like, so it was like normally the common variety would be green, and they were calling out this one as being red. And it's like, I've never heard of it. It's not borage, it's something else. But I'd never heard of it. And then one of the other judges at the table said, well, yeah, I have that variety out in my garden. I'm like, really? So is this right? And she's like, yeah, this is right on the nose. It's like, okay, great. So I think that's the kind of thing that I appreciate in a judge, when somebody's not afraid to say like, I don't know, because then it's all like, if you do know, you can say, well, to me, it means this, and this is what I've seen, and these are some of the examples. And if there's somebody there that doesn't know, then it's all like, yeah, we got to ask the comp organizer what's this all about. If we see him going on Google, then we're going to have to, take whatever we can and kind of work with what we've got. But I am never afraid to ask a question that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah, let's wear ignorance on our sleeves.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what makes us human.
Yeah, and hope somebody nearby knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, we're bipedal locomoting opposable thumbed, learning machines that keep making the same mistakes over and over and over. And that's just us.
I know a lot of times in judging situations, it can be hard for new inexperienced judges to navigate judging with a very quote high level experienced judge. And I know sometimes the concept of a judge pulling rank really rankles some people. Do you want to speak about that?
Oh, sure. I've seen it all the time. I've seen people that are high ranked that you would never know that are high ranked because they don't have an air of pretense about them. They don't wear their rank on their sleeve. They don't, running around in a room like it makes them important. I've been to competitions where somebody goes, and we're very fortunate to have a master judge here. And the judge raised his hand. He said, Grand Master. I'm like, seriously, you're going to go there? And this is, yeah, and this is in a room full of professional brewers. So it's like, and you just see all these heads go like, and swivel around and look at the guy, and it's all like, yeah, and guy was totally oblivious. He's trying to tell a guy who's brewing for a living, who's making, this stuff and selling it like it's, it's just flying off the shelves. It's that good. He's just trying to tell him, like, well, no, that's not the way that you do it. It's all like, well, yeah, that's the way that we brewed. Like, see those big 96 barrel fermenters there? That's exactly how we do it.
Nice. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm thirsty. All right. What are we drinking, Pete?
So tonight we are drinking Legend of the Norcini from Brimminghorn Meadery in Delaware, Milton, Delaware. There we go. If I can do that too. Hey, there we go. Oh, it's totally out of it. There we go. This is from a guy named John Talkington, who is a great mead maker. And the Brimminghorn Meadery is his brainchild. He's been at it for a while now, and he's making great stuff. John is a real craftsman. I think I mentioned him earlier about being into all things historical and interesting about mead, the history, the kind of background of certain things, the reference both as far as flavor and character, but as well as kind of in some cases spiritual and medicinal. He's done a great job of looking at recipes of different kinds of alcohols and different kinds of food dishes from all over the world and kind of rolling those into his meads. So I think he does a great job of that. This one is called Legend of the Norcini, and that is after a bunch of butchers from up in northern Italy, from the Norcina region, who were expert butchers to the point of where they would be called by certain cities to do all of the hogs when it comes time to harvest hogs and butcher them during the course of the season. They would always travel in pairs. So this is kind of a tribute to them, and they used certain spices in their curing process, and some of the spices, juniper berry, rosemary, pepper, are in this mead, along with black raspberry, blackberry, and honey. So kind of a nod of the cap to those guys and their skill. And some of them were such skilled butchers that they were even used by certain cities as surgeons of all things. So learn to butcher a hog and you can do an appendicitis for somebody. Nice. Or an appendectomy, actually.
Yeah, and the hope is that some folks that are watching this video are actually drinking this along with us. We're going to post what mead that we're drinking in advance so people can purchase it and taste along.
So, why don't we start out with glasses? This is your standard tasting glass that's rolling in and out of focus here. Not doing such a great job of focusing, is it? Oh, I almost had it there. Anyhow, a lot of the tasting rooms here in California, most of the tasting rooms actually back, say, 20 years, used these kinds of glasses. These are the ISO standard for tasting glasses. And I've actually got this filled a little bit fuller than it should be. It should only be up to about there. But we're doing a show and I don't want to have to refill. So these are great because they're small. They have a nice small closure at the top, which concentrates the aroma. Most people don't know this, but like the the big expensive glasses from Riedel that are made specifically for Shiraz and for Zinfandel and Cabernet and Chardonnay and all that. It's all marketing. You know, if you go to a sensory class up at UC Davis, you learn that pretty quickly. So these are great. The other thing is when you're tasting, you can't do this when you're judging because you're at the mercy of the competition, but when you're tasting at home and you're analyzing, and I differentiate between tasting and analyze. Tasting is tasting to me for pleasure and drinking. Judging is you're judging mead to discern the overall quality. Analyzing doesn't care about quality, it just cares about what's in the glass, what's there, what you're getting, what the different sensories are, if it's in balance, if it's out of balance, if there are obvious flaws. So those are basically the three things. And consistency is what I was saying before, and that's why I use this glass, is because it's consistent as far as, you know, using the same glass over and over and over and over, rather than, oh, this week I'll be drinking out of the tall Bavarian beer glass that I'm using because nothing else is clean, than, you know, one that's, you know, ready to go.
Yours doesn't have dots. It's not decorative.
Yeah, gotta like it. After a couple of glasses, you'll be like, wow, I didn't realize it was carbonated. Like, so you want to just step through this, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's pretend you're judging it. We don't have to quick think, but just when you're bellying up to a mead at a judging table.
Okay. So, you know, at the competitions I go to, 9 out of 10 of them, I'll bring you a glass with a number hanging off of the stem, rather than, you know, a bottle or anything like that. And that's the way I prefer it, because you don't have any outward indicators of what this might be. Bottle inspections are all done back in the pour rooms. So first thing I do is I pick up the glass, I take a look at it, kind of try to get a sense of what it is I'm seeing here. I'm off camera with that, sorry. You get a, you know, candle it, like I said, swirl it around, see what kind of reactivity we get, you know, see what kind of legs we see in there. Legs, by the way, or tears, as people say, is a product of the Gibbs-Marangoni effect, the evaporation of alcohol along the edges of the glass, sheeting. Get a sense of the color. You know, is it deep purple? Is it medium purple? Or is it light purple? Is it clear? Take a look at the edges. Does it, you know, does a dark purple wine, is it bleeding out to orange at the ends, orange and brown, which would indicate some kind of aging, still purpley, which would indicate still young without a whole lot of age underneath it. Swirl it around. If people aren't skilled at swirling, I would recommend that they grab the glass like this, put it flat on the table like you're using a pencil, and then make little circles with it like you'd be drawing circles on the table with the pencil, until it starts swirling around in the glass, and get used to that. After a while, when you get used to it, you can just pick it up basically any way that you want. I tend to go like this and then swirl it around.
So when you're looking at appearance, for example, you know, I've been learning about wine and how you're using that rim variation to assess age, or I guess maybe oxidation. When you're seeing that in a mead, can that be undesirable or just something that you're noting?
It depends. If it's on a traditional, and the traditional is, it can be a couple of different things. If it's browning and oxidative browning, and you get that, you know, oxidative kind of sherry, cardboardy kind of character, then you know that it's, you know, oxidated, because you're seeing, you know, the color change from, like, it's something like an orange blossom traditional, and it's more amber than it is, you know, golden. It tends to have those porty, sherry, oxidative kind of notes that aren't pleasant, rather than pleasant kind of characters, you know, from micro-oxidation that is beneficial. Take a look at the mead itself. Is the color indicative of how old it is. Is it more to the brown and darker amber color, or is it more to like the lighter golden straw wheat colored? There are a lot of indicators there, especially in traditionals. With a darker fruit like a black fruit or a red fruit, that's where you do that rim variation again. You look at it and say, okay, this is pretty much consistent from the middle to the end. It's not bleeding out orange. It's still very concentrated and deep purple from one end to the next. Looks, when candling it, it looks clear, brilliant, gem-like. The heft in the glass is good. It's got a nice hefty kind of a feeling to it, even with just a small glass with a small amount of mead in it. It sheets the glass very well. It forms legs pretty quickly. Has some nice fruity characters. You really get that pepper, that black pepper up in the nose, especially the rosemary and the juniper berry too. Mostly though is going to be that black raspberry that's in it. You can really smell that.
I've heard black raspberry does a lot of staining, kind of like thick skin grape. Is that true?
Yeah, it definitely stains that and currant. You put those in the same one, you've got the potential to stain half of your house with it, really.
So then are you looking at staining of the tears?
Yeah, the tears carry a lot of the color. In this case, I don't have actually I do.
Yeah, I don't see a significant amount of color in the legs.
See, I can see it pretty well along the rim, and I've got a light right here that's kind of like up on top of me, so I can see, the legs and everything that are. Can't really see it obviously. Yeah, it's actually got one, kind of granular, long, thick leg running down one side where I got a little too carried away when I was, drinking it. It went down the front of me, but it definitely has some color on those edges, and up around the rim too, where you're drinking, you can see that color kind of staining the glass. So, for me, if I'm doing judging, I belly up to the table, I get my first glass, I give it a look, I look for the legs, I look for the color, I look for the clarity, I swirl, get a sense, away from the top of the glass, just to give me an idea of what kind of, honey and fruit and spice and other kind of characters are in there. Then I go ahead and swirl it good and hard, and I just stick my nose right down in there, and yeah, it's definitely got some significant black raspberry and blackberry in the nose. You can smell the rosemary and pepper and the grape. You can also get that character in the high nose, the alcohol, the ethanol. Secondary aromas of like fruit leather.
If I'm not detecting, I think I do on this one, but if I have a very fruity, complex spice mead like this, how much honey character should I be looking for in the aroma?
I think that's going to be, some depending on what it is. Like I get the honey. It's not going to be overpowering, but I kind of take that into account with the kind of ingredients we're using in here. We've got some real big, bold fruit statements with the black raspberry and with the grapes and the blackberry. It's definitely, punching out of its weight class. The alcohol in there gives it a little bit of a lift and kind of adds to that warmth of the aroma. Kind of like, there's alcohol in there because you can smell it. You can smell it kind of like blending with the fruit as you're inhaling it. And then you kind of get that grape character underneath all of that, which is more of a Venus kind of a thing. You definitely get that character like of a wine, of a fermented grape underneath it. And then I kind of like to let it sit and just watch the legs as they kind of like slide down the side of the glass. But yeah, this one, when you let it sit, that it gets really leggy.
Should I be expecting in a judging scenario, if I have a mead with 3 fruits and 2 or 3 spices, is it a negative if I feel like I can't pick out each individual, or am I looking as just a harmonious, it works?
Yeah, see, now that's a tough one because again, I know we've all sat across from those judges that goes like, this is a blueberry mead, needs more blueberry. It's like, what the hell does that mean? It's like, you don't know what the guy was going for. Was he going for a subtle, light, kind of like frolicking, for lack of a better term, kind of a blueberry that's light on the palate, that has the hint and implication of blueberry, but not necessarily get out a cricket bat and beat you about the head and shoulders with it, with that amount of fruit? Or did he just not know what he was doing and add too little fruit? It's kind of hard to tell because we don't really get that kind of commentary in the judging notes. And so I always cringe when I hear needs more blueberry, or if it's spice mead, needs more cinnamon. If cinnamon's called out. Do you taste the cinnamon? Yeah, then it doesn't need more cinnamon. It's like, well, I like more cinnamon. There's the problem. It's what you like. We're judging. If you called out cinnamon and you taste cinnamon, he's done what he's supposed to. Now, what about the rest of the meat? What about the quality of the overall thing? That's what you want to talk about.
So if I was in a judging scenario and I had something similar to this and I couldn't pick out, let's say, the grape, like one of the fruits, is that something that should be marked down?
No, not to me. The whole idea to me of making a blend is something that's going to be greater than the sum of all parts. If we're looking for that, then when we are eating, let's say we're having a margarita, then we should be taking the sweet and sour sauce, the tequila, the salt, the lemon, and the lime, and going, yeah, I can taste them all. That's great. Why are we mixing stuff together in the first place? It's to get something that is a blend. And the notion that you're not getting each of these individually is, to me, it's preposterous.
Yeah.
It's like we don't deconstruct everything we eat until it's individual requisite parts. We kind of like eat things as a blend. Ketchup. We got sugar, we got tomatoes, we got vinegar, we got a little bit of other kind of spice in there. We're not trying to go like, the San Marzanas they used in this ketchup this year doesn't make any sense to me because they obviously weren't sweet enough. It's and there's a lot of people that want to deconstruct things like that, and that's just not me. It's like, if you're going to blend something and you're trying to make something that is a blend, it's not like you don't want to hit somebody over the head with a bat on each one of the ingredients, because number one, if you do it right, you're going to get all of those, but not individually. You're going to get little hints of it, and that's what I was talking about earlier. It's complexity. It's something that's always evolving, changing, growing, progressing, so that on that initial wash you get a little bit of that alcoholic heat, you get some of that nice raspberry character, and as it goes on a little further, there's some hints of blackberry there, and yeah, that's kind of like juniper berry, and on the back there's that kind of like earthy warmth from the pepper, and then there's some of that phenolics along the mid palate from the rosemary. That's how I think the individual kind of taste should be, rather than yep, there's blackberry, yep, there's raspberry, that kind of a thing.
Boxes.
Yeah.
The aroma on this is fantastic. Like
it's amazing.
The rosemary, it's like such a cooling, almost like a camphor kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really nicely played against the pepper too, because you get that earthy, like I would guess, if I was going to take a guess, I'd say this is probably telecherry pepper. It's not quite as dark and brooding as Malabar or some of the other black peppers that are out there, but it definitely has a kind of more spicy than more hot and earthy kind of a character like the Malabar. So I think this is a little brighter.
Yeah, it's
And
interesting
then,
how much of it has like a lot of low base notes, middling, like bright fruitness, and then just this ethereal, like
yeah,
character. Like it's like a total chord.
yeah, exactly. And that's, I think that's a really good way of putting it. Somebody asked me, what's the difference between um, a very heavy-handed mead and a very light mead? And somebody goes, oh, it's like classical music. It'd be like the difference between Mozart and Beethoven. I'm like, no, you know, a light mead, something that is just kind of like quaffable, call it the White Claw of meads. Um, that's not what I'd consider Mozart. It'd be like something that is light and elegant and airy and has a lot of different characters and flavors that are in abundance that come together to make this really wonderful, lively, pleasing, and very overall, tantalizing to the senses. The same as like like a single character fruit melomel, like a big over the top blueberry melomel that's just so full of blueberries that it's granular in the glass. That's not Beethoven. That's more like Holst or Mussorgsky to me. Beethoven, while his stuff is dark and brooding and brutal, it's also so full of content and character that it kind of defies the heavy-handed kind of description. So, and that's just me.
Yeah, I find a lot of judges really prone to call out boozy character as a negative if it's significantly like on this. Like I can smell the booze.
Yeah,
I can smell the alcohol in the aroma, but I think it's totally integrated. But I mean, if I was to imagine myself making something similar and entering it, I would predict that it's going to come back with comments about booziness, which I don't agree with. But it's just this judge tendency to just want to pull on any thread, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I was, getting at earlier. It's like I think we have a lot of things backwards when it comes to the BJCP Mead Judge certification program. And I Ken Schramm, myself, Julia Hertz, Vince, can never remember his last name. It'll come to me. And Gordon and Susan Rudd, when we sat down to come up with this exam way back before there was a program for it. One of the things that I noticed as we were talking was that, the training is like, what's the first big thing that everybody gets excited about when they start working on their BJCP mead, beer brewing and judging certification program is the fault kit. Everybody wants to know what the faults are. Why aren't we teaching them what the beneficial stuff is? Why aren't we teaching them the interplay of different hops and malts and the overall characters? The same way with mead. We need to teach people how to pick up on the nuanced stuff, on the characters and the subtleties and the layers and the complexity, rather than spending most of the time learning how to pick something apart. I've judged with judges that will not give out a perfect score because they just don't believe there's such a thing. And it's like, okay, so you're automatically going to limit something that's that good because you have a vested interest in not giving out a perfect score. Okay, that's fine. That's you. That's not me. We had 2 years ago, I think we had at the same table, we had 2 meads, and I'm thinking we actually had 3 that all got 50s. And you put them on the table and it's like, oh my God, they are that good. You're just going like, yeah, it's like, at first you're not believing it's got to be something. And it's like, no, there's really not. It's just that good. So, and that's got to be disappointing for somebody who had like a 48 or a 49 that walks away with no medal at a table. Because we've had, we've had people, pissed off. It's all like, I got a 49. How did I not get a medal? We don't grade on scores. We grade on what the best mead on the table is. And guess what? There were 3 other meads on the table that were all better than yours. Yeah. And this was a commercial producer. And so he goes, well, I don't believe that. So, and he came down to help us judge the following year. So we put him on that exact same table And then he came back at the end of the competition and said, now I understand. He said, mine was great. The other stuff on the table just blew me out of the water. And it was only a difference of a point, but the point was as wide as the Grand Canyon.
Sure. Yeah, I think it was my only 50 that I have ever had as a entrant. Didn't medal, but you get over it. Because what you're talking about, it's about what's sitting next to it and how does it
Yeah.
And you get to understand that.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing for judges, and I understand, and I even empathize, because at those best of show tables, like for instance, the home competition, our best of show table last year, we had 28 on the table, 28 from the different categories that we had to go through. And the first few go rounds is just a bloodbath. It's all like, yeah, I kicked this one, yeah, I kicked that one, yeah, I kicked this one, yeah. All the technical stuff's been done. This is the bikini contest of the competition. This is what the best meat on the table is. And then as we got closer and closer down to the last 10, then 7, then 5, and getting it down to the last 3, that's what always takes the longest. You've kicked out the rest of the stuff because there's just an obvious gap in the difference between quality and just characters and overall attractiveness. And it's coming to which of them you like the most, which of them you don't like, just based on preference at that point. Because that's when it gets down to the last 3, then we're not talking analytically in most cases. It's always something like, yeah, this one just has a weird character that I don't like. Or, yeah, this one is just, it's not as elegant as these other 2, but it's just that much more drinkable. And, it inevitably comes down to some little kind of characters like that, at least in most of the BOSs that I've been in.
The mini bosses I haven't gotten the privilege to judge a best of show, but the mini bosses I've gotten to be a part of, the ones I really appreciate the most are where that conversation starts out when you have, say, 10 in a mini boss or whatever the number is. It starts off like you're saying, you're cutting this one. I don't like it. This has something that sticks out. This might have an off flavor. This one's out of balance. But suddenly you're getting down to, say, 5 or so. And now the conversation shifts from what don't you like to, okay, what do you like? And it's a neat shift.
Yeah, it really is. And actually, that's where I learn a lot of stuff, for me in the best of show tables, because there's other people out there that are just like vastly talented. And, that's why they're sitting at that table with you. And so to let an opportunity like that go by without learning something from all of those people, to me, is just like a travesty. So I am all ears at things like that.
I'd love to see there be some sort of mechanism for feedback from the conversations that happen at mini boss and best of show for entrants, because it seems like that's where the best conversations, the most education happens, but an entrant doesn't get any of that.
Right. And I'm not going to say anything, because there's some things that I've been discussing with the other competition organizers that I work with. And I think, as you mentioned, that presents a tremendous opportunity for learning for everyone. And so don't be surprised if you see something coming out in that vein from the Mazer Cup in the next year or so.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're also going to be running some small sessions like this Zoom session with the judges that are signing up to kind of coach them through how we would like to see things judged at our competition. And a lot of the stuff that we've touched on this evening, when it comes to looking at overall quality rather than how many flaws there are, looking at the things that you can take away from that make impressions on you and other people, kind of coming to a collaboration rather than a confrontation on different, styles of mead and across the judging table. Listen, nobody wants to go to a competition and get sat at a table with a judge that is just contentious on everything. I think we've all been there at one point or another. I don't know if we've all been that judge, but there's been times when, I've sat across from someone like that and I go like, what do I need to do to get this guy on board? And then you kind of realize that you can't change anybody. All you can change is you. So then it becomes a thing where you kind of like find out what his or her points are that motivate them, and you kind of like move into speaking to those points and kind of like try to meet them halfway. And I find I have a lot of success doing that.
I'd like to pose a thought experiment for you. So there's
Sure.
obviously going to be judging scenarios where the judges are extremely far off in their point scores. So say one judge really loves this and he's at a 45, the other judge is at a 25. In all likelihood, one of them's wrong. So if we just meet in the middle and create an average, that's kind of a disservice to that entry, don't you think?
Yeah, I think the idea of keeping it within 7 points of each other is a good thing, especially for the entrance. I think that, as with any kind of compromise, you can't have one person walk away feeling like they won and the other one walk away feeling like they lost. So both people have to walk away feeling like they gave something away in order for the compromise to work right. What we do, and I'm sure most competitions do this, is like if somebody's at an impasse, then it's all like the table captain is like, we need the comp organizer over here. And so what the comp organizer will do, they won't look at the scores that have been given. They won't get any background on it, or whoever we have come over the table. They'll swirl, they'll look, they'll taste again, consider it, and then go, I would give this let's say it's 25. And then whether or not you guys agree with me, you need to be within 7 points of that. And so that's how we do it. And if we have somebody that refuses, so like, okay, we understand, go ahead and mark your score down, and when it's done, we'll just change it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna fight with somebody over things like that.
Well, I think involving that third party, I don't know if a lot of judges take that option or realize that it's an option, and it maybe should happen more.
Yeah, and we make sure to, in our little pre-judging thing, along with, and I'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. We make sure to let everybody know that, listen, you are not alone here. If you feel like you have a legitimate, point to make here, and you're not being heard, then do not be afraid to raise your hand and ask somebody like the room captain, the table captain, to call somebody over here who can take a look at this and give you an idea of what's going on. Maybe it's that you're just out of touch with what it is you're tasting. Maybe you're right and the other guys are. We don't know until we actually go in there and do an evaluation. But always feel that you can speak up and that you will be heard, because at our competition you will. We're never going to say, no, just listen to this guy or listen to this guy. We will go over there and evaluate it and give you an honest opinion one way or the other. And it's up to you if you want to agree or disagree. And most of the time, I think people listen.
Yeah, I think when you've been around competitions long enough, you've maybe seen unfortunate instances of bully judging, like you said, throwing their weight around, or you don't know what you're talking about. I've had the joy of judging with one of my brothers at homebrew competitions a number of times. As a rule, the only person I've ever told in a judging scenario that you're wrong and you're bad and your opinions are bad and you should feel bad was my brother.
It's funny how we do that to family and nobody else, right? Yeah, I know what you mean. I have friends that I'm like that with, and they understand me that, I'm just sometimes you just have a bad day, and it's like, there's nothing that's going to change it, nothing that's going to improve it. You kind of have to go like, hey man, I'll apologize now because I am not feeling myself today. And there may be drama. So just, just understand and understand that everybody has a bad day. I think, I've been at competitions where there's been incidents, and, at the time everybody got upset about it. And, after you get a little bit of perspective on it after a while or something like that, you kind of take a step back and go like, yeah, it got everybody around there, kind of up in arms for a few minutes, but it was a blip on the radar. So, it's water under the bridge, it's in the rear view, forgive and forget and move on. And that's kind of the way I try to do it. So like I said, we got bigger things in life to worry about than, having a disagreement or a competition. At the moment, it may seem, all encompassing and really, really important, but in the cosmic scheme of things, a difference between a 47 and a 43 isn't going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's a good sentiment.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on this mead?
Yeah, I could drink like a bottle of this, or 2 bottles, or 3 bottles. See, I'm a 750 ml guy, and anytime that I'm spending in excess of $20 on a 375, it's I get my wallet out and it's like, it doesn't want to come out of there. I can go out to the store and to the wine store that I shop at and get phenomenal wine from all over the world for less than $10 a bottle for a 750 ml. And that doesn't take into account how expensive honey is, the process, the shipping, getting our fruit, getting our other ingredients. It's an expensive proposition. I totally understand it. But the problem is consumers don't have to understand that. They don't care. What they see on the shelf is, a small bottle for the same price as a big bottle. And it's like, I'd like to get a buzz, and I'm thinking that small bottle isn't going to get me where I want to go for the same money that I'm spending for that big bottle. But that, again, doesn't take into account people who appreciate the craft, who appreciate the beverage, and who appreciate the art of putting it all together and making it work right. And so, it's again one of those like balance things, But I think from a market perspective, I look at that, and as an industry, the mead market, the mead marketing push and campaign is still pretty small, in its infancy stages, and we're getting there. But in order for people to be, more convinced to go ahead and pop that 20 for a 375, they're going to need to know what it is and have a sense of how it compares to everything else out there. And guess what? When people actually get a bottle side by side and they try some wine and they try some mead and they find out like, wow, I really like the mead. It's not as acidic as this wine. It's not as boozy as this wine. It's not as, bracing as this wine. It's actually more approachable and easier and nicer, and it doesn't wrench my palate like this wine does. Then they start to get it. So that's just me, because I'm a cheap SOB, and I don't like spending more money than I absolutely need to.
Yeah. We were not bribed to say nice things about John's mead. He has no idea that we chose this, so this is
right.
This is really it's a phenomenal mead.
Yeah, it really is. I'm, like I was looking at it in the Vino Shipper. I looked at it and I go, okay, that one looks interesting. And I know John does a lot of stuff with a lot of different kinds of ingredients and things. And he and I've known him since he's been, working at Dogfish Head all those years. And, he puts together a really good mead, and he's very, very, intense on making sure that what he's putting out is great stuff. And he's a wild character, and a great guy. So it's nice to see this kind of stuff coming out there from out in Delaware, and him putting together these kinds of meads. He's one of my personal favorite meaderies. There's a few of them that I order from, and this is a really nice one. He made one not too long ago that was aged in Lafroig barrels, if I remember right.
I think I was at the Wandering Woden.
Yes, that's the one.
Purchased that one with the same order. I'm saving that for a bottle share group at the end of the month. So.
You're going to enjoy that one.
All right.
Yeah. Hate when that happens. I had something that kind of like flashed, and so like, oh, I should say something about that, and now it's gone.
Sure. And you've never had this mead before?
No, this is the first bottle. I have 4 that are sitting in my wine rack, and when you and I emailed back and forth, and I said, well, I've got those there, so might as well. I said, yeah, I'm not going to taste it until tonight. And so I just wanted to hold off until I did that. So and it really opens up as it sits too. So this is.
Yeah, the peppercorn really lingers on the finish really nicely.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it's really funny is I've got a pepper grinder here that is half and half Malabar and Telecherry.
Okay.
And so I'm intimately familiar with both of these peppers.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that about does it. I just want to thank you, Pete, for your time. Thanks for having this discussion. This was really fun. And I guess cheers to Brimminghorn and cheers to John.
Cheers to John. One quick last thing. I said I was going to talk for a second about, our little admonition that we do at the beginning of the competition.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see a lot of at competitions is judges going outside and having a smoke and having a cup of coffee and then coming back into the judging room. And if there's people in there that have really sensitive noses like me and probably you and probably a lot of other people, it's kind of an intrusion on their senses, the coffee. So we don't allow coffee in the room. We can't do anything about people that smoke. We kind of ask them though, and this is something that I want to start doing, is getting some of those surgical gowns, not the cloth ones, but the paper ones. It's got the little beanie for their head, so that it's not billowing off of their clothes when they come back into the judging room. The other thing is, if you're a judge, my little regimen in the morning for a judging is I take a shower, I shave, and I use a, one of those long wooden handled boar bristle scrubbing brushes to scrub my face. I use a neutral soap like Neutrogena that has no scent. I brush my teeth with hydrogen peroxide so there's no flavor and it doesn't deaden your tongue like toothpaste does. It takes, I think if I remember reading it correctly, the stuff that they put in toothpaste, most toothpaste, there's some that are exception obviously, but it basically cuts your ability to discern certain things for at least an hour, if not longer. So if you just brush your teeth and run down to the judging room, you're going to be going in there slightly compromised. No underarm deodorant that's got aromas to it. Any kind of skin moisturizer or anything with scents, you don't want that. An unscented, fragrance-free kind of shampoo and all that kind of thing. Always have a glass of water for sipping in between case to keep that palate refreshed. And also, if you're having trouble picking up something that is difficult to, there you go. That's difficult to flay out some of the aromas. Stick your thumb down into that water, get it wet, and take it up under each nostril and get it wet, and then take another sniff, and you'll notice that you get like kind of a more heightened sense of what's there. You're working on the theory as one of the sensory professors at UC Davis said that, your nose is wet like a dog's nose, so you get more of those molecules, the scent molecules to stick onto it so you can get a better sense of what it is that you're smelling.
Are you an arm sniffer? I tend to
I generally, I either do, I take a sleeve or something like that, and that's why, like nylon, so there's no scent, like cotton has a definite scent. Nylon has a little bit of a scent, but not quite as much as some of the other things that are out there. And yeah, I don't use I use rubbing alcohol as an underarm deodorant when I'm judging. Again, I try not to put anything in front of my face that's going to get me any kind of undue influence on what it is that I'm judging. Clean clothes. If you've got a beard, scrub your beard, because those things can smell just awful. I know I used to have one, many, many years ago. You'd find stuff in there that, you wouldn't want to find, anywhere ever. And have yourself a little kit. I noticed you had your flashlight out so you could, candle your mead. Take a kit with you that has at least 3, sometimes 4 mechanical pencils with plenty of lead in them, so you can right if it breaks, and this one doesn't want to feed, so toss it and go for a new one. I always print my own labels just in case they don't have them at the competition. So I can put my label up there and don't have to spend time writing it out, because like most of us, we're all used to writing on a computer now. And like after like 3 or 4 lines of traditional writing, my hand just hooks up into a claw, you know. So it's just little things like that go to really help out. And if there's, it's like I said, one of the things you can do is if you want to learn about sensory analysis and get good at wine tasting and wine judging, mead, beer, the techniques are very similar for everything else. You know, in a nutshell, just a, you know, they call it the S's, the see, sniff, smell, swirl, savor, and spit. And so in a nutshell, that's, you know, that's what you're doing. I'll take the glasses off so I don't pop myself in the eye. But the, you know, see, swirl, sniff, smell, savor, and of course, I'm not judging now or I'd be spitting. And then once you've done that, swallow, do the retronasal. Close your mouth, breathe out through your nose. And also on the sample that you take in when you're tasting, 25 to 35 ml. You don't need any more than that. And spitting is, expectorating is absolutely necessary when you're judging a competition. Again, you want to give everybody who's entered and paid good money to buy their honey, to make it, to enter, and to ship. You want to give them your level best as a judge.
I see you're a swisher. Are you a, do you do the, where you inhale, kind of suck in a little air?
Yeah. And you have to, it's really funny to watch people that are new at this sometimes. And it's kind of a cruel, funny thing, but they won't tip their head down when they do that. And the problem is you atomize that mead and it hits you right in the back of the throat. And 9 times out of 10, that just shoots right out across the table onto the person sitting across from you. It's hilarious, but it's sad. You know, it's embarrassing as hell. But yeah, you do the little pulling the air in. I do like 3 or 4 different things. The other thing is when you're doing that sniff, you can do what I call take 3 little quick rabbit sniffs. So you take the glass, you do your nose, big deep one there, and then reset if you want, you know, go to the sleeve, and then like 3 quick little intakes through the nose like that, and you pick up a lot of really interesting stuff that way.
I remember sitting in on a, I think it was Gordon Strong HomebrewCon presentation, just discussing techniques for smelling and tasting. And I know he seems like he's a fan of a lot of different sniff techniques, like a drive-by,
Yeah,
like a quick,
yeah,
little bit, then do a couple deeper ones, and then do a real long, deep,
yeah,
reset.
yeah, absolutely. There's a ton of different ways, and you got to find the ones that work best for you. There's some people I've seen that like just through one nostril, you know, after they've done the big intake through one. It's whatever works for you. Try different things. Don't be afraid to look like a crazy person, you know, at the table. Because if it works for you, that's what works. And who knows, maybe there'll be a whole bunch of people learning how to, you know, do what I call the grimace, which is, you know, after I've taken the sip, I'll do the, because there's still that fresh wash in there, so you still got a little bit of residual in there. You do that. Put your teeth together and open up your cheeks and like, you know, like that, because you get that nice kind of like side character to it. Pick up some additional flavors that way.
Nice. Any other final thoughts, Pete?
I think I'm gonna drink this whole bottle.
Yeah. I the same here.
Yeah.
We are good.
Yeah.
It's probably not getting recorked.
Yeah. And thank you for the Zambezi.
Yeah, I'm sad that I can't get my hands on this honey anymore. I bought the 5-gallon bucket from Dutch Gold
Yeah.
was that, a couple years ago, and used it up.
Yeah.
Nothing, and they're not selling anymore.
No.
Man, that's a robust, complex honey. Holy smokes.
Yeah, it's like out there in left field. I really like it. Get a lot of that nice tobacco kind of character from it.
Yeah, tobacco,
Yeah.
cherry. It's got
Yeah.
some flour.
Yep, definitely. Well, I really appreciate you pulling me in on this. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. So maybe we'll do something like this in the future.
Sure, it'll be great. Count me in.
All right. Thanks a lot, Pete.
All right, Josh. Thank you. Have a good one. Good evening.
Good night.
Cheers.